evolution here. We have clearly, you know, this man is Darwin. Another important scientist in the story of evolution is Alfred Russel Wallace. I want to put his name in there. He came up with the idea at the same time of Darwin, but he didn't have the gravitas, and he wasn't as famous as Darwin at the time. So Wallace contributed his paper, and they got together a little bit. But it's mostly Darwin that's known for evolution. Darwin is the person who explained why we see all these amazing colors and all this variety. Like you see in these fishes here swimming in this, this coral reef, it looks like. So if you preview the understandings, five basic lines of evidence that we have for evolution. One is fossils. Okay, so fossils have been found the last 200-300 years, and what they show for us is that we can change over time. We see, for example, horses, and we'll get into that later, horses, armadillo fossils, and we see how they slightly change over time as we dig them up. And for a while, geologists have established that the deeper you go, the older you get in time in the earth. And it can be shown that earlier forms of these different animals and plants show that they're simpler, less sophisticated, less complex. Another line of evidence is selective breeding. Selective breeding, and also known as artificial selection. And basically that is when humans breed animals together. We make sure certain chickens breed together, certain dogs breed together, certain plants breed together, and we can change them in a short amount of time. We can see, wow, if this happened over 5, 10 years, 100 years, think if you had 100 million years, how much change you can see. Another line of evidence is homologous structures. And what homologous structures are is structures that are similar in shape, but they're actually being used for different purposes. And what we can see, it's called pentadactyl limbs. So pentadactyl limbs. So in whales, humans, fishes, cats, dogs, our arm is all made up of the same basic bones, but they're just different shapes and sizes. So showing over time, evolution doesn't completely throw out what's already there. It modifies what's working already to come up with a design that's well suited. Another, we see patterns and variation. Patterns and variation. And the best way to think about this is the Galapagos finches, or some people call them Darwin's finches. So these finches spread out amongst the different islands in the Galapagos, and since each island has slightly different ecology, different food source, the birds basically develop slightly different beaks that were best adapted to exploit that food source on each island. So it's showing how these animals can change over time. And also another similar thing that is shown by the Galapagos is speciation. And scientists they've been going back to the Galapagos because it's still a great place to study evolution. Also, lizards, amazing marine iguana there that, unlike any other iguana on Earth, can swim deep, can dive deep in the water, not 20, 30, 40, 50 feet, to graze on algae and plants that are growing in the water. Speciation. So this would be, new species coming about. Okay, so the basic overview. So we know heritable, which means you can pass them on from parent to offspring. Parent to offspring. So we know that, if we look at parents and their offspring, there's some similarities. Not always, some offspring look more like their parents than others, but usually you can see a resemblance right there. Another point here is acquired characteristics can change. So acquired, so things that you develop during your lifetime. And the primary way that all this evolution happens is natural selection, so the primary mechanism. So how does it work? Through natural selection. Okay, that's what drives evolution. That was really the genius, the main driving principle that Darwin wrote about in his On the Origin of Species. And the main reason why evolution, I'm sure we've talked about, the controversial nature of it, because it does conflict with creation. However, we'll get into good discussions later. It doesn't really, any kind of fundamental religious idea about how the world became what it is actually very similar to the Big Bang Theory. And of course, the only thing that's really keeping in conflict is that age of the earth, that calculation that some people try to make with the Bible, that how old the earth is, 5,300 years old, something around there. I forget the actual date, which we know the earth is 4.8 billion years old. And a lot of people think all religions don't want people to learn about evolution. They're against evolution, but it's actually the opposite. Most religions are completely fine with everybody learning about evolution. It's only some religions that take a literalist view of the Bible. And that's an issue in all religions. If a literalist view is taken of the religious text, you can have a lot of conflicts way beyond evolution. But I want you to know the Catholic Church wants you to know about evolution, and they think that it's a great explanation and that you should learn about it. Various popes have made statements, encouraging everybody to learn about evolution. They happen to just think they believe in something called theistic evolution, which basically means that everything was created, by a creator, and everything that we see has been set in place by that creator, which is fine. It doesn't prevent you from learning about evolution, because still in science we're talking about how this stuff works, not why it works. That's in the realm of religion. So by the 1820s, scientists, geologists, they discovered what's called strata of rock, so different layers, and different layers represent different time periods. Flooding, erosion, volcanic eruptions. And it could be placed in a time continuum from oldest to youngest. Okay, so you dig, the top layer is young, bottom is older, really deep down is the oldest. Okay, hey Jackson. And we're able to date whatever, at least get the relative dating of any fossil found in those layers by where they're found. But also we know can know very precise dating by using radiologic dating. Okay, so radiometric. Radiologic metric. Okay, so certain elements that are formed, that are in rock when it's formed, break down over time into different isotopes, and those isotopes can be measured, and scientists can date how long the rock has been around. You may have heard about carbon dating, because carbon breaks down over time too. But it's only good for about 5,000 years. But these radiometric dating can go back millions and millions of years, so it's very effective. But what we find is bacteria and algae appeared first, then fungi, then worms, later land vertebrates. And later on. Fish were about 420 million years ago, and I can't really see behind my little thing on with my face on it, the little video screen. So what's behind that? Amphibian. Oh yeah, amphibians. Those are 340 million years ago. Reptiles 320. Birds 250. Am I missing anything? Yeah, and placental mammals 110 million years ago. So you can see these organisms becoming more and more complex as we get closer to the present time. Very simple bacteria and algae, worms, and then we have the movement on the land. And we know from the ecology unit we just studied that autotrophs provide energy. So, for the heterotrophs, so it would make sense that in the oceans you'd have the plants developing first, and then on land you would have the land plants developing first. Okay, so plants, animals in the oceans, and plants develop for animals on land. And I love flowers and how they're pollinated in all these different fascinating ways. But flowering plants developed before insects that were developed to pollinate them. And like I mentioned before, we have a lot of these fossil sequences. Horses, armadillos are some of the best developed, because you don't find every fossil. Not everything gets fossilized. So this is really cool. What do you notice about the horses over time? 16 million years ago until the present. What do you notice about the body mass over time? You can see it stayed fairly steady until about 20 million years ago, and the body mass went up quite significantly. Okay, horses are huge animals, but not always. And that has to do with whatever climate environment they were in. It eventually became advantageous for them to be a lot larger. Like when I get around a horse, I'm like, holy moly, that's a big animal, it's 1,000 pounds. This is pretty cool. Like if you first see this, what kind of shape would you ascribe to it? And I think for me, it looks like branching. It's almost like a tree. All these different branches, some stop, little shoots, all these little branches, and that's what we see in evolution. One body type, will split off into two, and that'll split off depending. Some of these body types stay very similar for a long time and then split off, or they stay similar for a long time, never split, like you see crocodiles been around for a long time. And look at the geographic distribution. We see them originating mostly in North America, a little bit in the old world, which would be Europe and Asia. And about this time, 55 million years ago, you had a bit of a connection, a land bridge, most likely between North America and Europe or Asia. So you had, connection between those two land masses. But then those really ancient European horses went extinct while the North American ones persisted. And then you had another split into the old world, Europe, and that went dead too. And then another split. Just amazing. You look at evolution of what used to be here. You can go back 20, 30 million years ago, what you might find. And then, a whole bunch of different lines of horse evolution that went extinct until finally you have the population we have now. So pretty cool, especially showing that division between the old world and new world, and that horses primarily are a North American animal. So we have been manipulating plants and animals to suit our needs for thousands of years. We've been genetically engineering them. I was just down in Cancun, and that's an ancient Mayan area, and they were developing corn 2,000–3,000 years ago. So domestic chicken, corn, cows, pigs, they look very different from their wild ancestors. And artificial selection, humans choose who's going to breed with each other. And what we're doing is selecting traits that we like, and then we breed them together. And amazingly, the offspring tend to have the traits we're looking for. It's a little more complicated than that, and it's pretty time consuming, but it's really effective. And I think what's coolest is, most dog breeds we think about really haven't been here that long, maybe 120, 130 years, which shows you how effective artificial selection can be, especially when you're looking at changing the appearance of things. And that's what we're usually focused on, things that look different. Oops. And so we have wild chicken, wild pig, and the wild cow, and their modern versions that have been domesticated. So if we look at pigs, some differences, the color, horns, the hair, the body hair is different. It's much less body hair on those domestic, and much thinner, not quite as thick, that hair. So chickens, again, the color is different, and the feathers. And for cows, the color, and we saw the shoulder area. Let me see look at my picture over here. Yeah, on top of the shoulders, there's a big bump, and of course the horns. There's large horns on those on the wild. And this is pretty cool. Wild rice. This is what it looks like. Wild rice and domesticated rice, very different. And wheat. If you look at this wild wheat, teeny tiny kernels. But as we get more domesticated, we get larger kernels. That's really that difference I want you to show. Same thing with corn here. This is wild corn. I mean, you're not going to be putting that on a barbecue or spreading butter on it and eating it. It's just tiny, but some are bigger than others over time. Thanks to our Central American friends, they developed this larger cob that we now enjoy. That really was the basis of the food system in Central and South America and into North America. So mainly, the size of those kernels, and of course the color, and how the seeds are encased. For example, corn has that shell over it, and in the wild that would not work. The seeds couldn't spread. But since the domesticated one we spread, it's